In this section, we're going to cover division of complex numbers. And basically, when we say division, it's just something that you do when you have a complex number in the denominator. So here, notice I have a 5i in the denominator. Now, here I'm not going to actually multiply by the conjugate, but I will on the next two. But on this one, if the only term you have is the I term in the denominator, you can actually eliminate the I, because that's the purpose of division of complex numbers, is to eliminate the I from the denominator. So you can actually eliminate this I if you just multiply this term by I over I. So if I take 2 over 5i and just multiply it by I over I, watch what happens. I get 2 times I in the numerator, and then in the denominator I get 5i squared. And remember, since I squared is -1, then 5i squared is just going to be -5. So I end up with 2i divided by -5, or just minus 2/5 I. And so that's the concept there. Now, on this one, my denominator has an I in it, but it actually has the entire a plus bi form. So when you have the entire a plus bi form, the 2 minus 5i, what we need to do is we need to take this denominator, 2 minus 5i, and we need to multiply it by its complex conjugate, which would be 2 plus 5i. Now, if I multiply it by the complex conjugate, on the bottom, if I do that on the bottom, I also have to do it on the top. So I have to multiply the top by 2 plus 5i as well. So now, but on the bottom, remember, when you multiply these together, you get difference of squares. So this would just be 2 minus 5i times 2 plus 5i would just be 2 squared minus 5i quantity squared. And then on top, we're going to multiply these together, and we can do this with the FOIL method. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 5i is 15i, 4i times 2 is 8i, and 4i times 5i is 20i squared. Now on the bottom, remember, we had 2 squared, which is 4, and then we have 25i squared here. Now I'm going to go ahead and combine the 15i and the 8i here, and I'll get 23i. And then remember, 20i squared is 20 times -1, so that's going to be minus 20. Now let's look at the bottom. The bottom, I have 4 minus 25i squared. Well, if you got minus 25, and you remember that I squared is -1, then minus 25 times I squared would be positive 25. Okay, now the next step, I'll just take, in my numerator, I'll take 6 minus 20 and get -14, and then just bring down the plus 23i. And in the denominator, I'll add the 4 and the 25, and that'll give me 29. And so there's your answer, but a lot of times your instructor might want you to break this up into the two terms, so it's in the a plus bi form. So here I can write this as -14 over 29 plus 23 over 29 times I. And so now it's in the form of a plus bi, where a is the minus 14/29 and the b is 23/29. Alright, just going to do one more of these. Now this one is actually square root of 2 over square root of 5 minus square root of -7. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write square root of -7 as I times the square root of 7. Now, what's the conjugate of square root of 5 minus I times square root of 7? It's going to be square root of 5 plus I times the square root of 7. So I'll multiply the denominator by that as well as the numerator by that. So here I'm showing you I'm multiplying the numerator together. Now, to multiply the denominator together, you just square the square root of 5, and then you square the I square root of 7, and remember the middle term is going to be, you're going to have a minus for the sign, because it's going to be a squared minus b squared. So now, on the top, just distribute the square root of 2. So square root of 2 times square root of 5 gets me square root of 10. And square root of 2 times square root of 7 gets me square root of 14. And then, of course, I also have the I. And then on the bottom, when you square the square root of 5, you just get 5. And when you square the square root of 7, you just get 7. And then when you square I, you get I squared. So now the top is finished. I can't really do anything with that. That's just going to be square root of 10 plus I times square root of 14. But remember the bottom, this is -1, right? So I squared is negative 1. So really, this is going to be 5 minus 7 times negative 1, which is just 5 plus 7. So it's going to give me 12 for the denominator. So now again, break it up into the two terms, square root of 10 over 12 for the first term, and then square root of 14 over 12 times I for the second term. And so there now you have it in the form of A plus BI. A is the square root of 10 over 12. The B is the square root of 14 over 12. And that's it on the operations. In the next video, I'm going to show you some equations involving complex numbers.